All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome on in. Please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat, your name, your organization, anything that you'd like to share. We are so happy that you are here with us today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Let's get started. Welcome to our final installment of our Learning Together series. This is a community Q&A on substance use and recovery. So quick agenda items, welcome and housekeeping, some information about the Unshame North Carolina campaign, and then we will get right into our panelist introduction and question and answer. Before we get started, wanted to put this slide up here. So like I said, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. This session is being recorded, and if you would like a certificate, we are happy to send one over to you. Just email us and let us know you'd like a certificate of attendance. All attendees will be muted, but please use the Q&A button at the top of your screen to ask questions. You can also use the chat. We definitely want to keep this as engaging as possible. So if you have any questions that come to mind, please feel free to put them in the chat or use the Q&A button. To access closed captioning, click More, select Language and Speech. I also want to shout out our amazing interpreters who will be joining us. They will be spotlighted. And then to adjust your view and see all speakers, click View at the top of your screen and then select Speaker. So what is Unshame North Carolina? Unshame North Carolina is a statewide campaign led by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services in partnership with Shatterproof. The goal is to remove stigma around substance use disorder through a community-driven approach. So the Unshame North Carolina campaign works by partnering with communities across North Carolina to reduce stigma around substance use disorder through education, storytelling, and resource connection. And so why are we here today? What is the purpose of this webinar? The purpose today is to have our amazing group of our Community Impact Committee join us to talk about substance use and substance use disorder through an interactive Q&A. So I cannot say how much, please put the questions in the chat if you have any. So these are a group of individuals with diverse lived and professional experiences across the spectrum of treatment, recovery support, harm reduction, and community care. So our CIC members will share their expertise across these different spectrums. And without further ado, want to shout out our amazing panelists, and then I will actually let them introduce themselves and tell a little bit more about their journey and stories. So we will start with Megan Peavy, then Dane Willis, and then Jeff Walker. And so I will go ahead and pass it to Megan.
Hey everybody, my name is Megan Peavy. I am someone with lived experience with substance use disorder. I've been sober since January 25th of 2019 and utilized medication-assisted treatment at the beginning of my journey. I struggled for a really long time to find my way into recovery, and it was with the help of a peer support specialist that I sort of engaged and started building a foundation. I became a peer support specialist in 2020 and have been in the field ever since. I worked on the post-overdose response team at Healing Transitions, which was incredible for a little while, and helped start the syringe exchange program over there. Big advocate for harm reduction. Went to another community-based organization doing office-based peer support before I got involved with the Rise Collective, which is where I currently am. So we're a nonprofit serving women that are currently and formerly incarcerated with residential treatment and programs, as well as non-residential support. And so I am the peer services manager here. And so I I support the peer support staff and the team that we have, and work closely with our clinical services manager to just support the women that are in the program and still inside, to the best of my ability. I love being a part of this and feeling like the people in our community and the people doing this work care about reducing stigma, and to have lived experience and to be able to show up and be a part of this is important and it matters. And so I'm really grateful to be here today, and thank you all for coming.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. And I'll pass it over to Dane.
Hey y'all, my name is Dane. I am a licensed clinical social worker and addiction specialist. I also, like the other members in the committee, have lived experience with substance use. I myself entered recovery in 2016. And a little bit about that real quick. So I know Megan mentioned utilizing MOUD. When I was entering treatment, Medicaid expansion hadn't occurred yet, and I couldn't afford MOUD. And it's a miracle that I'm still here. I did not have a return to use, but if I did, I most likely would have experienced an overdose. And I cannot attest to any more than I like just so much that MOUD is an essential part of treatment for opioid use disorder, especially in the era of analogs, fentanyl analogs, and just synthetic opioids in general, just far more dangerous. So thank you for sharing that, Megan. But yeah, entered recovery in 2016. Had a couple buddies, really close friends, die of an overdose in the same week, which kind of motivated me to pursue some type of career in this field, helping others with substance use disorders. Specifically, opioid use was the main motivation. Started as a peer support, sort of as a wilderness guide at a treatment facility up in the mountains. Eventually went back to school and pursued my Bachelor of Social Work and Master of Social Work to become a social worker. And today I pride myself that I am a social worker by the true meaning. I meet people where they are. Big harm reduction advocate. I lead with harm reduction. It's the best intervention I see right now in combating the overdose crisis. And it's a shame that it gets so much negativity from certain areas, because I've been in this field for quite a while now. I've been in the abstinence space. I've been in a lot of the spaces that encompass substance use treatment. And right now, I don't see anything being as effective as harm reduction, of engaging people that are in active use, engaging them whether they stop or whether they keep actively using, making sure they have naloxone, right? Trying to connect them with MOUD, whether that's methadone or bupe, whatever it is, trying to connect people with those services, regardless of what I think they need or what the organization I'm with thinks they need, meeting with them no matter what. And so big harm reduction advocate. I'm actually also certified in harm reduction psychotherapy, so I really like doing clinical work in the harm reduction space, which we need a lot more of, and we don't see that much. I'm starting to ramble a little bit, but today I work with McLeod Centers for Wellbeing. I'm a clinician there with about 50 patients, and I also work in the macro space, working with Disability Rights North Carolina. As an advocate. I've been with them for several years now, working on anti-discrimination, on an anti-discrimination team, combating substance use disorder discrimination in healthcare settings. And yeah, and then also I serve on some boards with a harm reduction program called the Steady Collective in Asheville, and also on the board with Haji House Harm Reduction in Charlotte, North Carolina. Thanks.
Yeah, that was great. And then Jeff.
Hey, thank you. Hey, everybody. My name is Jeff Walker. I'm too an individual with lived experience with substance use. Also, individual with lived experience within the criminal justice system. Spent most of my adult life going in and out of jails and prisons. Today, I have not been locked behind locked doors since May 28th, 2016, and I haven't found it necessary to use any substances since June 12th, 2014. 2 of my years of recovery came from behind the wall when I was locked up, and I found value in there of connecting with people. something that I didn't have for a long time in my life was connection with other humans. And so we supported one another the best we could while we was in there. And when I was released, I'd heard about peer support and I wanted to become a peer support. So I did that. I then helped start a nonprofit here in Wilkes County, a very rural community in North Carolina called Recovery Revolution. We have 12 unique programs that we call a recovery ecosystem. We are a recovery community organization, meaning we are peer led, that the majority of the people that work for us have lived experience. I'm a peer support specialist trainer of the North Carolina new curriculum, recovery coach facilitator, recovery coach harm reduction facilitator, emotional CPR educator. So I enjoy being a part of trainings and connecting with people in the trainings and trying to share the word of recovery and human connection. I too, like Megan and Dane, am a huge advocate for harm reduction. People cannot live if they're not alive, if they're unalive. So I think we have to help individuals that use drugs. They matter, their lives matter, and show them unconditional love and inspire hope. I am grateful to get to share space with everyone, Dane and Megan, and Jayla, and so I'm grateful to be here.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. So we can go ahead and dive into the questions. Feel free to jump in wherever. What is one misconception about substance use or addiction that you wish more people understood? And how can we help change that narrative in our communities?
Well, I will jump on this one. There's so many, there's just so many. I think there's two that come to mind, and one is that it's a moral dilemma, right? That we're just bad people. I don't feel the need to explain why we're not in this space, but I'm happy to if you would like me to. But the second is that it needs to look the same for everybody. I think how individuals define success when we have conversations around substance use disorder or opiate use disorder need to shift, right? We need to open that up a little bit as a community because what I define as success and what someone else defines as success might not be the same, and that's okay. But how do we support that person? And like Dane said, meet them where they're at to get them wherever it is that they want to be. I think we have this general idea of what we want people's lives to look like. And that's not always accurate. And I'm excited to hear what Dane or Jeff have to say, or I will ramble on this for a solid 10 minutes.
I'll jump in real quick, Jeff. One of the things that comes to my mind on top of what Megan already shared is treating this condition as any other health condition that you would think of, right? Whether it's diabetes, blood pressure condition, whatever it is, right? That it's a medical condition, and that people, need grace, right? They need, health care for this condition as well. And so when we try to look at it like that, it tends to help a lot. Also, the way we're talking about it, right? Like we're saying substance use disorders, we're calling them what they are. We're not referring to ourselves as addicts, or alcoholics, junkies, terms like that just don't really help. They're not very comforting coming from people, especially when they're in active use. I'm trying to think, I had another, more importantly, like what I really want to mention here is that a lot of people with substance use disorders are not really aware that they have rights. And they're treated very poorly, and they think that this is normalcy. They just think that this is a thing that happens, especially in this country. And they are protected by particular laws, especially as it relates to healthcare. They do have the right to healthcare for this condition and any other condition, just as anybody without this condition has a right to healthcare. And I think sometimes we hear stories about people not getting access to that healthcare, and we hear them so much that we normalize it and don't realize that that's actually illegal, and accountability doesn't occur. And I see this a lot in my work. And the ADA does protect people with substance use disorders in healthcare. So when you're seeking these services, whether it's rehabilitation, actual healthcare in the hospital or with a primary care, you deserve to be treated just as anyone else. And I cannot tell you how many times I've heard stories of professional doctors, nurses, just people in the healthcare field not looking at this condition as the same as they would any other healthcare conditions. That's another really important piece I'd like to mention on that. And I'll pass it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Megan and Dane. I will start by saying we are some of the most resilient people that live on this planet, right? We have learned through our journeys to take our struggles and turn them into strengths, and we do recover. And again, to echo Megan, what does that look like? How do we measure individuals recovering? And that looks different. And recovery has many pathways. And if we're truly meeting people where they are, we'll support them in any of that pathways. Going back to harm reduction, right? How do you measure that? It might be that someone that is unsheltered came in and got some supplies and syringes and was able to take a shower that day. Celebrate that. That's a big deal. You know what I mean? If we measure recovery from active use to recovery for many years, and that's all we measure, then you're not doing it right. It's not authentic. Two, I also think that individuals that are doing this work, if we stop listening to the people, when I mean the people in recovery, and more importantly, the people that are still using drugs, if we're not listening to them and developing services or programs around to support them better, then we're not doing it right. Right? We have to listen to the people, and that helps us guide how we support the people.
One more thing I want to mention is if you are really interested in learning about this population and about this condition, I highly encourage you to research a little bit about the drug supply and how complex it is and how dangerous it is compared to even just 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. It increasingly becomes more toxic with more adulterants that users did not ask for, right? Were put in the supply without their knowledge, and a lot of these substances have created even higher dependence. And on other substances that aren't necessarily opioids that can be treated by the particular treatments that we use for opioid use. And so it's really complicated, not only the drug use, but the drug treatment as well, and people being able to access it and want to access it because they might experience a lot of withdrawals from a lot of different things when they're trying to stop using.
Yeah, thank you all so much. This person also submitted a follow-up, well, a second additional question. How can we as community members recognize when to step in and offer help versus respecting someone's autonomy?
Can you say that one more time?
Yeah, so how can community members recognize when to step in and offer help and support versus respecting someone's autonomy?
I don't think it has to be either or, right? I think my willingness to offer help is contingent on your being alive and present. And so how do we define that, right? So sometimes how are we defining helping someone? Sometimes that's just sharing space, getting them a shower, making it sure that they know I'm available if they want to talk, right? Versus if we're defining it as like engaging in treatment, that's on you, right? That's up to you. But you'll know I'm here if you want to. But I don't think that it has to be either or. We always respect autonomy first.
I would just add, I think when children are involved, I think that's typically a good situation where, or a situation where the help is needed when you can recognize someone really does need help, because there's more than just them at risk. But for me, when I'm working with people, kind of like Megan shared, whatever they're willing to do in that moment, right? If it just means hanging out with me, right? If it just means me making sure that they're not alone a lot, because that's usually why people die from an overdose, is because they are alone. I can't tell you how many participants in the last 6 months that are still here because they were not using alone. That's literally the only reason, and they had naloxone. from a harm reduction program. I think that this all comes back to harm reduction, especially when we're trying to engage people initially, because we can build rapport and we can start to get to a place where they might really know what they want, and we can present how they can get there or some paths that might help get to where they want to be. But ultimately, this is why I love the harm reduction space, because it's the only space that I go in where I can meet with people exactly like they are. I can offer them services, whether no matter what, essentially. Whereas, you know, in a typical treatment facility, right, if they don't want the services that are being offered right that minute, there's really nothing that we can do. And that's frustrating. And so I really like that in the harm reduction space that we make that space for them, that we give that time and that energy to just being with somebody and building rapport to where they will open up and talk to us more. And maybe one day they will potentially want to get on a medication or go to treatment, whatever that looks like for them, or get housing, right? Whatever it is. I'm not going to make one thing contingent on the other, like, oh, you can't get housing until you get treatment. You know, you can't get treatment until you do this. Like, that's not conducive at all. And so, yeah, I think that kind of sums up what I was trying to say.
You know, I believe that you show up with a level of compassion to anyone. I think the first thing you'll find out if someone doesn't want you there in their presence, they'll let you know that. Then you definitely respect that. You know, I'll tell you a story real quick. I was up in Asheville over the weekend and doing a training, and so at lunchtime I wanted to go for a walk, and I went for a walk, and I heard this individual like screaming out loud, and he was sitting on some church steps. And so I had to walk by him on the sidewalk. So I just said, how you doing, buddy? And I sit down with him for about 10 minutes, and he introduced me to his invisible friends. He was experienced psychosis. And so I met his invisible friend, spoke to his invisible friend, and just found a way to connect with him the best I could on the level he was on, right? Towards the end of the relationship, he started getting very emotional and crying. And his response was, everybody's walked away from me because they're scared of me, and nobody has connected with him. And so he felt alone. And as Dane said, we don't want people to feel alone, right? If they do not want us there, if that gentleman would have said something and didn't want me there, I would have kept it moving, right? But I'm a type of person, I understand safety comes into that play for some people. And so always keep yourself safe. I'm not saying that, but I think it's important for me anyway to be intentional about connecting with the individuals that not many people want to, because of the stigma and the rest of the stuff.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for sharing that. That was great. What are some stigma reduction techniques to utilize in faith-based settings that you might offer?
I think we're going to talk about it near the end, but attention to language, to empowering language and how we're speaking to people, and adapting some of the, if not all of the harm reduction model and person first model to ensure that anybody, no matter what, that we're not harming people. And I think it's just with every setting, not just faith-based, right? But with every approach that we're utilizing the core principles and values of harm reduction to serve the people that are struggling.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Megan. The biggest thing that I can think of, and this isn't just faith-based by any means, but I just know that it does occur in faith-based scenario or faith-based environments and facilities and programs, but you know, accepting all forms of treatment, right? If you're a recovery housing program, like long-term, you know, or not, or just not long-term, whatever it is, a step down from inpatient treatment, you know, to help someone navigate early recovery, which is a very sensitive time and a very difficult time for people that are coming out of treatment. When people are coming out of treatment and they're trying to get placed for aftercare, and the aftercare coordinator is trying to find them somewhere to go, when these places tell them no because they're on methadone or because they're on buprenorphine, I can't really describe what that feels like for that person that's trying to access that resource. that they're not good enough because they're on this medication, right? That they're still using because they're on this medication, whatever, even though it's evidence-based, the gold standard for opioid use disorder, especially severe opioid use disorders, which is what we're primarily talking about. When that person can't find aftercare from a treatment facility, that is very, very concerning. And it very much limits their capacity for their early recovery and I guess also the chance that they get through early recovery, right? If they have to go back to the same environment they were in, there's nowhere to go. What is the what likely comes from that? A return to use a lot of the time. So I think it's really important that if we're treating people in this field, whether it's in inpatient treatment, in detox, in aftercare, housing, in programs that are long-term, we're accepting all of these treatment models. And sometimes that can be a maintenance medication, like methadone or bupe. I know it's complicated with methadone because of the OTPs, but there are ways, and also it is an accommodation that we are required to provide, especially if we're receiving any public funding of any kind, that we can't be discriminatory in that way. Back to the ADA, like I mentioned earlier. And so I think that's the biggest one that I think of, is just accepting all forms of treatment, not discriminating against certain types.
It's a great question. I'll start off by speak up, speak out, and speak well. What I have found, again, we're in a rural community, and there is over 300 churches in Wilkes County, which is a lot for the size of our county. And we tried to start services here in 2016. Like, everybody told us they will not allow you to do that in Wilkes County. And so it took a lot of advocacy. We sent out a community survey because we didn't have much support for people with substance use or mental health here in Wilkes until 2016. And we sent out a survey. It's like, where does people go when they seek help? And the majority of people said a preacher or a church, right? And so we had to do boots on the ground work and go to the churches and kind of educate them. At that time, it was about transitional housing. That's what we had. And so moving forward, we did establish that program, and then we realized the gap that we're missing the people who are using drugs. And so then obviously we want to have a harm reduction program. And the majority of the people, and I don't mean this with no disrespect, but the majority of the people in this community that was against that. And what we found, again, we had to do the boots on the ground work to advocate and educate, is people don't know what they don't know. You know what I mean? And it, like, taking the time to explain in harm reduction that it is so much more than just handing someone, supplies and syringes. That's a very important part to stop spreading infectious diseases. But it's a level of connecting with them individuals and inspiring hope. Here in our community, it brought a population that hadn't been seen or heard in a long time into community, right? And you're saying, hey man, I see you, and we love you. And so during having these conversations, and they have been very uncomfortable in some settings, people leave with a different perception. Some people leave with the same perception, right? And I have to accept that either way and keep going and doing what I do, right? I've also learned, and I say this a lot of times, in this county during that process for 7 years, I called a lot of people out in the town legislation, and because I'm too very passionate about MAT, and it's the gold standard, and everything I was saying I had researched and was absolutely scientifically proven or been proved best practice. But I had to take a different approach here in my community and quit calling people out and try to call them in. And so when I did that, by doing that, it allowed some people to understand, right? So I had to learn a different approach in the faith community and community in general of having these uncomfortable conversations with people.
Yeah, something going off of what you just said, Jeff. Something we always say is you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I love that point. Thank you. What would you have found helpful as a teen, or what are the best strategies or resources for helping teens who might have substance use disorder?
I can go first. So I don't have kids, so I don't have direct experience with this. I can say that when I look back at my youthhood, that my parents didn't really do the best that they maybe could have. I think they were doing the best with what they knew. I'm not by any ways speaking to them negatively. But like Jeff said, you don't know what you don't know. And I just think that they didn't know how to handle that situation when it eventually occurred. I think that having these conversations before something happens like this, something before substance use really would enter a teen's life. I think it's really important to have those conversations to create that space where they feel comfortable to talk to you about it. I can say that that was not the case when I was a teenager. My parents were very anti substances, and I felt like I had to hide everything. And that also led to me getting in trouble with the law because rather than doing something in a safe place, I would do it. And this was just, stuff like smoking marijuana and things like that, like doing it in my car, right? Because I don't want to get in trouble with my parents. And then it leads to me getting arrested and having a charge for, forever, essentially, if you're charged as an adult, which happened as I got older, in 18, and it just stayed there forever. So I think having those conversations, making sure you're creating that space where someone can feel comfortable to talk to you if they are struggling, and that they're not going to get judgment and they're not going to get shamed about it based on this idea that the parent has about drugs, because it's just not helpful. And I just think creating that space prior to when that actually occurs is what really makes the biggest difference. From my experience of being on the other side of it, not the parent.
I feel as if speaking for myself and my experience first is, and Mr. West High, I was voted most popular. I was doing my thing in high school, right? Of course, some of that came with smoking cannabis and drinking and stuff too. But me personally and everybody around me thought that what I ended up experiencing in my life would never happen, right? And nobody really talked about substance use or any of that. I'm 49 years old. And so it just wasn't talked about a lot, and people didn't realize it could happen. I wish I could have been more educated on it. And still to this day, like, back in my day, I think they had DARE, DARE. And I mean, I'm not even gonna go into that, but you know, we don't have enough education about this in our community, in our schools. And I even think that should be, from what I hear, starting at your middle school, sixth, seventh, and eighth, and of course your high schools, right? I think we sweep certain things under the rugs because we don't want to get the bad rap at the schools. You know what I mean? When kids have overdosed and stuff like that, like they sweep it under the rug instead of trying to look at the problem and allowing Narcan or allowing education into the schools. For me, like, it should be a part of your curriculum in a class that you have to take, not maybe all year, but something you have to learn, just like you do with the rest of your education, because it's that important, because it can happen. And again, to echo Dane, like, if someone would have told me, like, this is what could happen. I grew up in a family to where, same, they did the best they could, but they never thought what I'd end up experiencing would ever happen to me. And allowed me to start that process. I also think it's important, like, we talk to kids about trauma and childhood trauma, right? Because that was the root of my substance use. I didn't know that till I was 32 years old, because I couldn't realize the trauma that I had lived through as a kid, right? And so at least having those conversations I had with my son. I was absent from my son for 10 years because I was incarcerated. And so that was from the age of he's 2 to 12. And so when I reconnected in his life, like, I was worried to death he's going to end up like me. And he hasn't. And so he will tell you, because I had some of them conversations with him. And I talked about trauma. I talked about substance use. I talked about how you could be this and end up here if you're not careful. And then plus, too, in today's time, to go back to what Dane said, it's like educating on what could be in the substances. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't have to worry about that back in my day. I knew what I was doing. I knew what it was going to do to me. I knew how it's going to make me feel. But anymore, there's so many different substances in the drug supply. So having the conversations.
I think I agree with everybody. And I was just reflecting on my own experience. I was ripping and wreaking havoc from an early age, and I had everything. I had an in-house therapist that my dad brought in. I had access to just resources, right? And it didn't change my outcome. I still ended up in juvie and wilderness camp. But I thrived in a structured environment. But then she let me out and let me come back home, and I'm gonna do what I want. And so, although I can't tell you something that would have changed my outcome, I do think that we need education and we need access, right? And that's something that I think a lot of times we're stopping, is youth having access to harm reduction supplies, having access to education about how to stay alive. The fact is that the numbers of youth actively using substances and overdosing have just increased incredibly. And the programs have not expanded to match that demand. And so we need that to happen. Um, Having conversations like this and speaking up, because it's gross, right? We don't want our kids. I don't have children. I have dogs, but I wouldn't want them using, right? I wouldn't be like, let's find a solution. I too would be like, nah, it'll be different, or whatever story we tell ourselves because it's uncomfortable. But I think we need to be having courageous conversations and meeting those kids where they're at too. And the thing about being a kid is if you talk to me like I'm a kid, I'm going to bark back at you. Right. And so we respecting their autonomy, respecting their humanity and their right to do what it is that they want to do, give them the support and the tools that they need to stay alive is important.
Absolutely. All right. Also just want to, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A tab or you can drop them in the chat. But to our panelists, what is one action each of us can take this month to help create a more recovery supportive community?
So I would say I have two. And it's not something that you can necessarily just mark off, but one is to stay curious and ask questions. Being curious about the work that we do, being curious about the people that we serve matters. Not putting people in boxes and staying open-minded, and then paying attention to the language that we use, challenging ourselves when we hear something that just lands a little bit off or feels a little bit judgmental or has a negative connotation, to challenge that within ourselves. I have this saying for myself that I'll hear it, stop it, change it, right? Change the narrative. Because we're human and we have opinions and things happen. But to catch that, to hold yourself accountable and maybe watch a couple of videos or talk to some people in your life that are mindful, that use inspiring language to bring that out of you if it's something that doesn't come naturally or isn't as easy having these conversations or in this work. And look at the website that my friend Dane posted. I didn't know about that, but it's in the chat and check it out.
Kind of an extension of what Megan shared with, challenging especially when I can think of language for sure. I have buddies from high school that I hang out with here, a little story time. And we go out to dinner on Fridays, and it's very cool. I like hanging out with them, but they're not educated on this stuff, and they'll say certain things. And I think the other night one of them said crackhead, and I called it out, and they initially thought I was like kind of joking that I was calling them out, but I was like, that's not cool, man. Like that doesn't feel good. And I used to smoke crack, and so it's kind of offensive to me too, and they understood that, and they were like, well, what would we call them? I'm like, well, it's a person that uses crack. That's what they are. That's what they're doing if they're using crack, right? Like, it's just a person who's using drugs or using crack. And so thank you for that, Megan. But also, I think learning how to reverse overdoses. So if you don't already, maybe go to a harm reduction program and they can show you how to use naloxone. There's also a ton of trainings online, so you really don't even have to do that. You could go on YouTube. There's naloxone trainings everywhere now. And also, if you really want to get involved at all or just on the ground, I've never gone to a harm reduction program that doesn't welcome volunteers. And they definitely have things that you can do to help out with. And I volunteer a lot in harm reduction, and it is extremely fulfilling. And this is on top of my work. Like I care about this community, and I care about this cause. And if you do too, I highly encourage volunteering in harm reduction. I think it'll be very rewarding for you if this is something you're passionate about.
Yeah. I said it a while ago, but I speak out, speak up, speak well. And so if your community might be a little bit like mine and you're on social media and you see someone using stigmatizing language or seeing someone that hurts, what you're seeing, what you're reading that hurts you, you've heard us mention meet people where they are, meet people where they are. And we're talking about the people we serve. We was also, Megan, talking about youth, or Dane was talking about the youth, meeting the youth where they are. We have to meet our community where they are. And sometimes that's being willing to being comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations, right? And so what I've had to do here in our community, and not to get political, but it's been political, um, is to have these conversations with people that has really said or done something that hurts, that's caused harm in our community, to be willing to say, hey, would you like to sit and talk and let me explain that you're wrong. You're just wrong. And here's the data, or here's the science behind it to tell you why you're wrong. And by doing that, we have changed perceptions in our community. And again, we have not. People still leave feeling the same way when they come. But being humble, meeting everybody where they are, the best of your ability, and just keep educating. And always, for me, always remain teachable, right? I think that's important. Like I learn from y'all, and I'm always trying to grow and do better. So
Absolutely. And then we did get a question. What is your position on it being a disease versus a learned behavior or an extreme habit?
Can I answer the whole thing? Or did you want me to just say on that one?
No, please.
So it's a disease. That's just what I know and what is scientifically proven. But I like to challenge these types of questions because to me, personally, professionally, it doesn't matter what we're calling it, right? When I'm using and actively using substances, I don't have an opinion of whether you think I have a disease or it's a behavior, or I just can't keep a needle out of my arm. The fact is like I need help and I'm not okay at the time. And I think that I have spent time in rooms where it comes up, or the bias comes out of opinions about whether or not, it's a choice or again, a moral issue. And it's just not, it is a disease. And I think that the substance use isn't all of it, right? And so how do we get after everything? And remember that we're people. At the end of the day, it looks different for everybody, and how it impacts one person isn't going to be how it impacts everybody. But at the end of the day, I've never had a participant come in my office and sit down and really care what we're calling it. They just want help. Or they don't, and they don't want to talk to me, but they don't care what we call it, right? We're just not well. So yeah.
For me, I would just revert to the science behind it. That this use does physically and chemically alter the brain structure and function. especially prolonged use, severely. I mean, especially with decision making, being able to make good decisions isn't always something that, not saying they can't make any good decisions at all, they can, but the use does impact the brain in that way, the substances that are being used, and not just while they're using. I mean, even after you stop, there's still a lot of brain development or brain, I guess, repairing that has to occur, to even get back to a normal, quote unquote, normal brain structure. And I know with opioids, that can take up to 18 months. And so when I think about it in that way, and that there's, return to use, just like there are, any other health condition can have a reflaring, right? It can occur again. Kind of points to being a disease over a behavior or a habit. Not saying that habits aren't formed in substance use disorder. They are very much, and they can be also another thing that they have to kind of work on in recovery, is break those routines and those habits that aren't always just associated with the use, but with the lifestyle, and how I think about things, and how I process things in general. It affects us in every way, and so in that way, I think of it as a brain disease.
I agree with Dane and Megan. Like, no one's ever come off and said I have a disease. They just want help, right? I do think we're in 2026, and this disease is the most stigmatized disease there is, right? You do not hear everybody degrading any other type of disease that people has. You know what I'm saying? And so it is. It's been scientifically proven. A lot of people are saying it's a choice, and that's just not true. You know what I'm saying? So I understand. I think the question evolves around language. You know what I'm saying? And maybe trying to reduce stigma when it comes to that. And I think that's cool, but I don't want. We've been fighting, and we got to keep fighting for the disease of addiction. You know what I'm saying? And so I don't want that to get lost in the sauce. You know what I'm saying?
I like to think of, like, if, for example, I have diabetes, and I get to a really good place with it, but then the type I have is if I eat poorly, it'll kind of reflare it. I'm not a diabetic expert, so if I'm messing this up, I'm sorry. But if they go to the hospital or go anywhere and they start criticizing them for how they started eating, and that's what the cause of why you're, ultimately it is a part of it, but it's still a disease, right? You see, I just kind of think of it in a similar way of, it's not the action that leading to the disease. It's still a disease regardless. And yeah, thanks, Jeff and Megan.
Since Dane said that, let me add something that it drives me crazy when I hear it, and I hear it in our community talking about diabetes and insulin, and then comparing that with Narcan, right? Why is Narcan free? Why is Narcan free? Why can't insulin be free? Well, I wish it was, and start a nonprofit and buy it, because Narcan is not free. You've got people out here that have started a nonprofit and that are buying it to make sure it gets to the people, right? So I just thought about that when Dan was saying that.
That was good, Jeff. Thanks.
Right, and then we can take Peter's question. So it's in the chat. Do you all have any suggestions for how we might engage people with substance use disorder who are still in the pre-contemplation or contemplation stage?
Can you define engage?
Peter, are you?
Like peer support or like treatment setting? Like, what's the, yeah.
To see if you'll talk about what you might mean, Peter, by engage.
So I think that is peer support, right? Peer support is meeting someone who may not be already or even willing to consider the fact that they have a disease or making poor choices with themselves and what they want. For someone to share their lived experience, to say that I've been here too. What do you want to work on, right? So I facilitate peer support trainings as well, and it's one of the most exciting days of my trainings is when we have conversations when your peer's going to be resistant, right? Resistant to change talk and resistant to taking any suggestions, and that's okay. It's kind of the beautiful thing about peer support is it's not contingent on your willingness to take a suggestion or make a care plan or make a decision to do something different. We're going to share space, and for this hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, you're not going to be alone, right? We want to build community and connection, and I genuinely believe that abstinence is not the answer, or connection is. And that's what we need, is to feel human and to feel seen, and having a peer support specialist wherever you work, whatever organization you're with, and however you are showing up in this space. I encourage you to get peer support specialists and have people with lived experience have a seat at the table, at every table, because they are the people that have the most impact, to just feel human and not alone, because I needed to know that someone had been in my shoes. And it took me a really long time to get from pre-contemplation to contemplation preparation. It just took a long time. And if it wasn't for somebody who had been where I was, talking to me, meeting me where I was at, sharing her experience with me, and then giving me some grace when I was like, well, that worked for you, not going to work for me. I don't want it. Right. And she said, well, I don't need you to do this. I don't need you to be sober. I just need you to stay alive. Right. And let's talk about Narcan. It is just hire them, get them, find them, refer out for peer support, make peer support a part of whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, I don't think I can add much. Megan pretty much covered that, and that's what I was going to say, is creating that space, regardless of what their goal or destination is. Being there for them, developing that rapport and that trust for when they do potentially start to get contemplative or pre-contemplative, and you're picking up on that you have those resources ready. We can get them where they ultimately want to be then, right? Because just because they don't want it early on, like, doesn't mean they won't want it later. And I think that's something in the treatment field that often gets dismissed, or is just like, oh, you don't want it? Okay, we can't help you, or, oh, well, let us know when you do. But it's like, well, who's engaging them until they come back? And that's where peer support comes in, and grateful for it. Thank you.
Yeah. Dane and Megan said it, as people with lived experience and peer support, we have lived experience through all the stages of changes. And so it's important to meet them individuals in whatever stage of change they're in at that moment. If they're going to continue to use, then let's make sure they use safely, right? I also think it always says their voice, their choice, right? As a job as a peer support, it's not my job to fix them, right? It is our job to connect with them, use trauma-informed approach, person-centered language, all the things we've learned as peer supports, to hope to empower them to find their own solutions and be whatever stage they want to be in at that moment, and support them through that.
Yeah, and I'm going to share my screen. I think a common theme we heard today was about language, and making sure that we're using non-stigmatizing language. So I have this here, and I'll send the slides out, but if any of our panelists want to chime in on just non-stigmatizing language or anything about language that they'd like to add.
I think language is the most important tool that we use as human beings, in this work and just in life. I don't think we pay enough attention to the language that we use and how we communicate. I talk a lot about the difference between empowering language and power robbing language. It starts with me, the way that I speak to myself. It starts with how I express my opinions and beliefs and facts, or whatever it is that we're talking about. And so there is always a positive spin, but I need to be held accountable to that. And so I needed to surround myself with people who challenged my language. I took a lot of trainings. I took a lot of classes. I analyzed and reanalyzed the peer support and content that I teach, because it's always changing, right? Empowering language is always changing. What is trauma informed today? It's going to shift in a couple months based on the world and what's happening. And so I need to stay educated and I need to stay up to date, and I need the people around me in my life, personally and professionally, to hold me accountable to that. And so when I slip up or I say something that I shouldn't, generally referring to myself, I need someone to call me on that. And so I need community for that, right? I think too that I just in the habit, and if y'all wanted specifics about language, we can do that too, but I'm not going to say something about myself or say something about somebody else to the version of me that was like 6 years old and needed somebody to like advocate for me and fight for me. So I think about that little girl when I talk about myself. I think about the person in front of me who's ripping and roaring and doing whatever it is that they're doing, that inside of them is still that child, right? And so how would I speak with that child? And am I willing to hold myself accountable to that? But I think, again, education, communication, and accountability with the people in my life has been incredibly important to me with challenging the way that I speak in general all the time. I hope that was helpful.
It was. Thank you so much. I just want to thank you all. Thank you all for coming. I want to give a huge shout out to 3 of our amazing CIC members, Megan, Dane, and Jeff, for coming and just sharing their amazing perspective and journey with us. I also want to thank our interpreters for taking time to come and help us out. Please feel free to scan this. We'd love to know your feedback, thoughts on this webinar, any feedback that you like to share. We would appreciate it. And then on that note, I just want to say thank you again so much. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, everyone.